I'm getting my master's in Holocaust and genocide studies. So a lot of the content that I study doesn't have any audio. It's in black and white. And October 7th was the first conflict that we really witnessed that was live streamed by the perpetrators with full color, full audio, full video. And yet globally, we saw a reaction to that where people were denying that it happened at all or making excuses for Hamas and really like supporting the perpetrators of such atrocities. We're entering really a new reality when it comes to what modern warfare looks like and how that plays out in the social media world.
Internationally, Israel's standing has never been more complicated. It's one of the most impressive countries on the planet in terms of what it can do. It has achieved extraordinary gains, and yet it is increasingly isolated and lonely on the international stage. It is targeted by misinformation, by conspiracy theories, diplomatic and legal warfare of different kinds. It's been, I think, repeatedly sort of reduced to this caricature of specific individuals or factions that represent a small fraction of Israeli society.
Welcome to Passages Pulse, where we track the heartbeat of Israel and the Middle East from a Christian perspective. In a time of confusion, division, and misinformation, we're here to help you cut through the noise with truth, clarity, and conviction.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Passages Pulse. My name is Josiah McGee. I'm here with my co-host, Olivia Lane. Today is Tuesday, July 7, 2026, just a few days after the 250th anniversary of the 4th of July, or American independence. Happy birthday, America. I had a great time over the weekend. I hope you did too, Olivia. Although I'm curious, you were not in the States. I mean, here in the States, it was maybe a little bit easier to find a big party to attend, that sort of thing. In Israel, I don't know what the vibe was exactly. So would you like to share maybe, before we jump into our actual episode, what was 4th of July like in Israel?
It was great. It was definitely, as I was thinking about, what it means to 250 years and like being in a land that has, we have roads in Israel that are older than that. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so much history here. So to be in a land that is known for being so ancient, to celebrate America, there was this sort of dichotomy between those two things. But what I decided to do is we took a group of people and we went to this place called Mike's Place in Tel Aviv. Have you been, Josiah?
Oh, yeah, like the very American spot in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Mike's Place is basically like an American bar. Like it looks like something you would see in Top Gun, for example. Like it looks like a classic American bar. There's American flags everywhere. It was decorated for the World Cup. And you can't shoot fireworks in Israel for obvious reasons, but they advertised on their Instagram that they were shooting fireworks. And I was like, that's crazy. And I show up, they had this big plasma screen TV that was just shooting fire. There was like video of recorded fireworks, which I thought was really hilarious.
We're showing fireworks.
Right, they're showing fireworks, not actually doing the fireworks. But no, it was great. Mike's Place actually was the place. There was a terror attack that took place there in 2003, and 3 people were killed there. And 7 days after the terror attack took place, they reopened. And they had a memorial ceremony for those who lost their lives, and they reopened. And so it was really powerful to be at a place that had been through so much suffering, that had rebuilt so quickly, and surrounded by, you get people from everywhere going to Mike's Place. You get lone soldiers, you get even like Canadians, people who normally maybe they wouldn't go out of their way to celebrate the 4th of July. They want to feel like they're a little bit less far away from home. And so that was a really cool experience. So that's what I did for 4th of July.
Cool. Yeah, your own slice of Americana right there in the middle of Tel Aviv for the 4th of July. It sounds like a lot of fun. Well, thank you, Olivia, for giving us a brief peek into your 4th of July celebrations. We're going to go ahead and jump into the meat of our episode, or our actual episode for this week. This week, we have some news of our own to share. Normally, we're sharing news about the Middle East or the region, but we have some Passages news to share and reflect on. So we're going to jump right into that. And then Olivia and I will, like I said, have a few thoughts to share as well. What's the news coming from Passages this week? Breaking news. So this is not necessarily breaking news, actually. Something we've been thinking about for a little while now, but wanted to share with you all. We've been releasing a podcast episode of the Passages Pulse basically every week since we started this thing. I counted up, actually. This is episode number 64. We started this in May of 2025, and it's been great. But moving forward, we have made the decision to release episodes less frequently. Basically as needed to explain big events rather than doing so every week. I think, for example, you can expect us to probably do an episode after Israel has some pretty significant elections this fall. It looks like they're going to be pretty significant, meaningful in terms of the future of Israel and its government. So we'll be bringing episodes to you to discuss topics like that, but not bringing episodes to you every week like we have for the last year plus now. Why are we making that decision? Like I said, we've been discussing this for a little while now, trying to figure out what's actually the best approach for this podcast, The Passages Pulse. And really what it comes down to is a couple things. We started this, like I said, May of 2025, year plus ago. And just for context, I mean, that is before the first major Israeli operation against Iran and Operation Midnight Hammer, that the U.S. operation against Iran in June of last year. It was before major developments in Lebanon, is before the second major war against Iran and this current ceasefire we're in. So a lot has happened since then. And as we reflected on this podcast, we came to the realization that really what we had originally set out to do, which was create a podcast for our alumni and a resource for alumni of our trips, was not really necessarily what this podcast has been doing for the last year plus. It's been a lot of fun, but a couple of things have changed since we started this podcast. One, it's a weird new normal for us and for the region, but there does appear to be a new normal emerging in the Middle East. It's strange. It's hard to recognize at times, but you can begin to see some patterns developing in a bit of a new normal. What that means is that we will continue to share reflections as things change, but the pace and type of change that is happening in the Middle East is a little bit different than what was happening when we started this podcast. So it doesn't seem like we really need to release weekly episodes anymore to sort of keep up with what's going on. The second thing is that we believe, and still believe that the best way to engage alumni of our trips is directly. We had, I think, Olivia can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to speak for her, but I at least had the most fun. I think she had the most fun doing a podcast episode where we live streamed it and got to have a live conversation with the audience and took questions. That was great. That was fantastic. That's the kind of engagement that we want. That's why we do this podcast in the first place, is to interact with our alumni and have interesting conversations. We want to do more of that. So that's why we're going to sort of scale back these pre-recorded episodes we've been doing every week so that we can create more time for conversations like that. As far as what you can expect next, if you've been listening to this podcast, alumni or not, first of all, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and willingness to engage in these conversations with us. We will still release episodes, but like I said, less frequently and more when something big happens, some breaking news that really demands some attention. We'll try to invite guests periodically when it makes sense, but we don't know exactly what that cadence will look like moving forward. We'll kind of have to wait and see what the news is and then figure out who it might make sense to invite on the podcast. And we will, of course, be leaning into very direct engagement with our alumni audience. So we want to invite you to continue to be a part of the conversation, but even more so, actually, we really would like to have more direct engagement with you and having some actual conversations. So please, if you're an alum of Passages, keep an eye out for a schedule of upcoming alumni Q&A sessions that we're scheduling so that we can spend some more time with you. We really would love to do that. Also, we would love to spend some more time in person with you. So I'm going to pitch it to Olivia to tell us more about an opportunity to do just that.
Yes, Josiah, you're so right. I know you and I both thrive on those in-person interactions. It's one of our favorite parts about our job is getting to actually see our alumni face to face. And you guys will have an opportunity to do that. This September, we are having our Israel Impact Summit. And for those of you who don't know, if you've experienced Israel with Passages, the Israel Impact Summit is really where all of your experiences are able to come together. We bring alumni, you guys, to the heart of American decision-making in DC to sort of explore how your faith, how history, how policy, how all of these things intersect and how your experience in Israel can translate into real impact here at home. So just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect from this summit if you were to apply and if you were to able to attend. During the summit, you'll be in Washington, D.C. You'll have exclusive briefings with policymakers, powerful site visits, interactive sessions designed to really help equip you as a Christian leader. You'll also be able to visit Museum of the Bible, which is absolutely amazing if you haven't been. It's so, so amazing. And you'll be able to dive deeper into the Judeo-Christian foundations that connect the United States and Israel. And it's an amazing chance to connect with like-minded peers, to meet more people in this space. And it's your opportunity to really put your experiences that you've had in Israel into tangible action. And also, it's a really good way to reconnect with the people that we went on your trip with, not just your peers that were on the bus with you, but also like staff members. Josiah and I will be there, and we'd love to say hi and we'd love to interact with you guys. So if you're interested in signing up, you can find this info at our website at passagesisrael.org, and we will also link it in the show notes. It's in our link in our bio on social media as well. You should sign up. We'd love to see you there.
Yes, to all of that. We'd love to see everyone in person. It's a highlight of our time, given that we work with people who are spread all across the United States, and the majority of our time spent together is on Zoom or Teams or some sort of digital interface. Any opportunity to be together in person is always appreciated. So we would love to see you there and have you participate in some, I think, very interesting conversations. We've got quite the speaker lineup already planned and are adding even more names now this week working on that. So I think there's going to be some really fun times to be had in DC this fall. Now, we want to spend just a few minutes before we sort of wrap up this episode. We didn't want to just make an announcement and then walk away. I wanted to offer a few reflections in terms of what have we learned through the course of the last year plus of producing this podcast and having these conversations. Initially, it was my former colleague Sebastian and I having these conversations, and I've been very fortunate. Olivia joined us a few months ago as well, and we've also had a number of very interesting guests. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just sort of reflecting on what have we learned, because we have covered a lot of ground and subject material over the last year plus. Maybe we can sort of synthesize a few high-level takeaways as far as what we've talked about and what we've sort of come away from these conversations with. So, Olivia, I'll pitch it to you again if you want to start, and then I've got a few thoughts as well.
Yeah. The other day I was reminded that it's been now more than 1,000 days since October 7th, which is like such a weird reality that I think we're living in, because for some people that date feels like a lifetime ago, and then for others it feels like yesterday, and then for, people who are actually living in Israel and those with, loved ones serving in the military, for the families of hostages, for the communities that were shattered, and also, for communities in the north that are still under consistent rocket fire, there are the consequences of October 7th that are still being lived out today through the ongoing war. And I think that's a reality that I've come to know better through this podcast, through sitting with you and really talking about like these realities, because something I really appreciate about what we've been able to do here and what we've really done with your leadership, Josiah, is that we've made these stories that I think so many people around the world view through a like distant lens because they're viewing it through social media. We've made it more tangible for them. It's been more tangible for me by talking about the spiritual reality of war, by talking about the real human suffering that happens because of evil. And so I think that's something that I've really learned through this whole process as well. That's one thing. Another thing I've learned is just how effective social media propaganda is. Through a lot of these episodes that you and I have done, we've really consistently talked about these conspiracy theories that are really prevalent online, and we've gone in and we've debunked them. And October 7th, I was talking to a friend the other day about this, how like I'm getting my master's in Holocaust and genocide studies. So a lot of the content that I study doesn't have any audio. It's in black and white. And October 7th was the first conflict that we really witnessed that was live streamed by the perpetrators with full color, full audio, full video. And yet globally, we saw a reaction to that where people were denying that it happened at all, or making excuses for Hamas, and really like supporting the perpetrators of such atrocities. And we're dealing with the consequence of that today. We're seeing that online still super prevalently. And there are incredibly important topics that I know, even though we're, reducing the frequency of these videos, I think it's really important that we're still continuing to do these Q&A sessions for you and I both. That was like really such a life-giving thing to be able to like talk to our alumni like that, because you guys have questions about this, as you should. And I'm super excited to continue to talk through those things with you, because we're entering really a new reality when it comes to what modern warfare looks like and how that plays out in the social media world. And I will just never take for granted what we've been able to do here, and also the ability that you and I have to be around like-minded peers, to learn from people in this space, and to be able to do a lot of that in person, which is a huge part of the reason why I'm looking forward to being in DC later this year, with our alumni, and get to like sort of talk about some of these things in person as well.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of strings we could pull on there, Olivia, and keep talking about for a while. I think one of the things that I definitely want to mention, though, that stands out is the role you mentioned social media, and I'm going to push the envelope a little bit further. I think maybe even a little bit more dangerous than social media is the introduction, even more recently than social media, or even a little bit after October 7, of artificial intelligence, and the way that that has
Mm,
also reframed
yeah.
modern warfare and the way that we think about conflict and human suffering. Number one, obviously, artificial intelligence is now a part of the battlefield. It's clear that we have autonomous platforms, semi-autonomous weapon systems that are now playing significant roles in the battlefield, I mean, in
Yep.
modern warfare. Off the battlefield, however, the impact that it's having is also pretty significant because, to your point, the challenge people already had on social media was trying to understand the human element, the real, the tangible, something that you could actually grasp and understand in a tangible way with your senses. And that is just exponentially more difficult when you're not only separated by a screen, but also by this, mental hurdle of, am I looking at something that artificial intelligence created or at a photo that a real person took? Even a photo that someone takes doesn't tell the whole story. But if
Yeah.
artificial intelligence manufactured the photo, then it's just exponentially more difficult to figure out what the real story actually is, especially if you're always second guessing. So I think there's some real lessons that we've had to wrestle with and are going to have to continue wrestling with in terms of how you understand what's real and what's not. How do you trust the information that's in front of you? How do you discern what is truth and what is a very elaborate, sophisticated lie in many cases?
Mhm.
For me, I think honestly, it's just impressed upon me the importance of visiting Israel. I mean, the only way to really know if a picture is telling you the truth or if it's a manufactured photo or a fake of some kind is to go and look at it for yourself and see with your own two eyes, because your eyes can't lie to you the same way that an artificial intelligence engine can. And
Yep.
I think that's something that I've really been thinking about recently, just the importance of actually going and seeing for yourself. The other things I think have definitely stood out to me, though, is I took a step back and like a helicopter 30,000-foot view of the situation facing Israel and the United States after October 7, even since we started this podcast. There were two things that really stood out. One, internationally, Israel's standing has never been more complicated. It's really remarkable. The number of guests that we've had on to talk about this, or the number of times that we've had conversations about these really incredible military operations or intelligence operations that Israel carries out. It's one of the most impressive countries on the planet in terms of what it can do. It has achieved extraordinary gains, and yet it is increasingly isolated and lonely on the international stage. It is targeted by misinformation, by conspiracy theories, diplomatic and legal warfare of different kinds. It's been, I think, repeatedly sort of reduced to this caricature of specific individuals or factions that represent a small fraction of Israeli society.
Mhm.
To be fair, some dark corners of Israeli society at times, but for that to be what is presented as a representation of the entirety of Israeli society, it's put Israel in this very difficult position where it is arguably both stronger, more powerful, and more vulnerable than it has been in decades, which is really a strange paradox to wrap your head around. But that does seem to be sort of where Israel is at right now. That's part of why I argued in the beginning of this episode that the elections coming this fall are going to be massively consequential for Israel,
Mhm.
because a key issue at the part of those elections is not just, how to assign responsibility for the failures of October 7, how to get accountability, how to ensure Israel's security moving forward, but also who is going to be the best person, not necessarily best party, but the best person to rebuild Israel's diplomatic standing in the international community after a pretty brutal stretch of 3 years post October 7. That's a really fascinating question. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot there that we'll have to come back to when we do revisit this podcast for future episodes. The last thing I wanted to mention is that there has been not necessarily directly related, but certainly in parallel to that, a significant complication in the US-Israel relationship as well. And we've talked about this a lot over the course of the podcast. I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, but I do think it's worth sort of reflecting on and summarizing where we have come since October 7. And even before that, I mean, if you go way back to the origins of Christian Zionism and then eventually the US-Israel relationship, which came after the origin of Christian Zionism by several hundred years. Originally, the U.S.-Israel relationship was built on a pretty solid foundation of Christian Zionism, of the movement of Christians who felt like modern state of Israel should exist for the Jewish people. And that has since been largely forgotten or misunderstood. I think there's a lot of mischaracterization of how Christian Zionism emerged in the first place, go back as far as 1600s. A lot of mischaracterization of what motivated Christian Zionists over the centuries, how they organized themselves. But the result of that really is that even before October 7 of 2023, people had forgotten what Christian Zionism was originally rather than what they sort of painted it to be or the character they had created of it. They had forgotten the origins of Christian Zionism generally and in the United States. And October 7 didn't start that trend. It just poured fuel on the fire, essentially, by prompting a moment in which Christian Zionism was on the decline and Christian support for Israel was declining. And at the same time, you combined that with a series of other very dangerous forces, like a surge of Islamism or anti-Semitic populism that frankly has risen pretty sharply on both the far left, socialist circles, but also on the far right and the more neo-Nazi circles, which are more and more coming out into the open and seeking acceptance within the traditional conservative institutions or political circles in the United States. That's pretty remarkable. The fact that Christian Zionism, again, was already sort of on the decline, but that trend was then met with this counter trend of other forces seeking to replace it essentially and flip the U.S.-Israel relationship upside down is pretty incredible. That just the historic moment that took place after October 7. The current administration is arguably one of the best friends that Israel has ever had, despite a lot of disagreement and debate. Anyone who argues that the U.S. and Israel have always been tied at the hip and have always been perfectly aligned is lying to you. Just study the history of the U.S.-Israel relationship. It's actually been pretty up and down for most of the history since 1948. And the current administration is very friendly. And that's just a basic fact. However, in 2 years, what happens next? I mean, if you're looking at some of these trends that we've been exploring over the course of our conversations, there are some very real, very big picture questions about the future of American politics and Western civilization. If you have very far left Muslim socialist hybrid candidates winning primaries in places like New York, or seems like one is well on the way to winning a Senate primary in Michigan, that's pretty dangerous. But if you also have people on the far right coming out, people like Nick Fuentes being openly embraced by people who would be previously considered more moderate conservative institutions or individuals, that's also very dangerous. What's going to happen when this current administration leaves office and then we have a pretty consequential election of our own in 2028? Who knows? At this point, I would say one of the big things, and then I'll stop talking in a moment, but one of the big takeaways that I have sort of arrived at after spending some time reflecting the past few weeks is that Israel is more than a microcosm. I mean, it definitely is playing a pretty significant role in some of these debates and conversations. But at the same time, it's not the whole story either. I mean, there's something much bigger that's happening in terms of the competition for the spirit of the integrity of the American political experiment and the future of our country. And it's more than a proxy, but it's also not driving the conversation all by itself. It's sort of been co-opted for these dangerous agendas that are being put forward by both the far left and the far right in the United States. And we've got a lot of soul searching to do before the next election cycle, where we're going to be having some national level elections. First midterms this fall, and then again for the presidency in 2028. So, Olivia, anything there that you want to respond to, or anything that you want to add?
The only thing I can think of after you said all of that is, so we'll be back. And don't you guys worry, we'll be back.
We won't be back next week, but we will be back. I mean, there's just some massive things coming down the pike that we're going to want to talk about.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to do that together with our audience.
Super exciting. Very looking forward to more Q&As, to hearing more from our alumni directly and being able to engage that way. I think it's super important. And we rest assured, if Josiah and I are in the room, we will have things to talk about. Don't worry.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think that's a good place for us to wrap this up, Olivia. If you don't have anything else to add, I just want to say thank you, Olivia, for jumping into this podcast project with me a while back. It's been great having you on as my co-host and someone I could bounce ideas off of, someone who I can ask to listen to me rant for a few minutes, honestly, is sometimes what it feels like, but really appreciate you being here for that. Appreciate Lindsay, of course, for all the work that she's done producing this podcast as well. She's done an excellent job, and we really appreciate her support on the back end of all of these projects. And then to our listeners as well. Thank you for coming along for the ride and for supporting us through these past year and a few months of producing a podcast. We're sorry to be, not producing podcasts as often, but look forward to producing them periodically and finding other ways to engage you more directly, hopefully. So we hope that you'll stick around and come find us for some of those Q&As and other conversations we would love to have with you. And we will not see you next week, but see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Passages Pulse. Passages seeks to prepare and empower a new generation of Christian leaders who love God, stand with the Jewish people, and support Israel. To learn more about Passages, follow us on social media or visit www.passagesisrael.org. Until next time, we'll keep you connected to the pulse.